Stefan Baumann's The Grand View is funded in part by
Plein Air magazine for people who love painting outdoors. pleinairmagazine.com
and by
Masterpiece Canvas, makers of fine art canvases. We supply the canvas, you supply the vision.
and by
paintingfromnature.com, a website for artists seeking inspiration, advice, and knowledge to master painting from nature. paintingfromnature.com.
According to native legend, the earth was controlled by the natural forces of two spirits, Skell, the god of the above world, where the marsh people made their home, and Lao, the god of the underworld. Lao's only access to the upper world was through the vent of Mount Masama, a great and ancient volcano. Upon one of his visits, he fell in love with Loha, the beautiful daughter of a Klamath chief. He promised her immortality if she were to be his bride. She refused, and in great anger, Lao rained fire down upon the people of the marsh, and a great battle ensued between the two great spirits. In a final act of fury, Skell collapsed Mount Masama upon Lao, sealing his access to the above world. Lao's followers cried and cried, filling the great hole with tears.
My name is Stefan Baumann, and welcome to The Grand View. For generations, Crater Lake National Park has been known for its beauty and mystery. 100 years ago, it became one of America's first national parks. And today, we celebrate that anniversary and the landscape itself that inspired so many. So come along with me and explore this fascinating place called Crater Lake National Park.
From my mother-in-law, I heard that Indians were afraid of Crater Lake. That's why they never go up there. Well, that piece of land that sticks out in the lake, there was these two men. They went out on it. They walked out there. It was getting late in the evening, so they decided to go home. When they turned around, the ground they walked out there on wasn't a foot wide. It got narrow. They had to crawl back out. Well, they got in their horses and left. One of the men looked back, and he said, "Oh, look at that," he said. They stopped, they looked back, and they saw that lake was on fire, flames coming up. So they turned around and come back toward the lake. When they got there, it was just calm. I was born in 1908. I mean, that's what the record says. I really don't know. My mother was a Pitt River Indian. Fourth Pit River Indian, and my father was a full-blooded Modoc. From my grandmother, she didn't live very long. That's where I learned to speak the Modoc language. But after I start studying the Klamath language, a lot of it is different. Some words are the same, but most of them are different. I married a Klamath Indian July the 29th, 1927. We had 300-400 acres, a lot of land. We raised grain and stuff like that, wheat, rye. Damigen patidit äwan chia gentat relatat. Are you thankful today that you're walking upon this earth? Your life is spared again, another day.
You're sitting on the side of a volcano that experienced one of the most dramatic volcanic eruptions in the last 500,000 years. This old volcano began to grow probably around 400,000 or 500,000 years ago and grew very much like many of the other Cascade volcanoes up until about 8,000 years ago. And then it experienced an extraordinary volcanic eruption about 7,700 years ago. And it blasted so much material out of the magma chamber underneath the volcano that basically it left a huge empty space under the mountain. Phantom Ship is some of the oldest rock exposed anywhere in the park. It's about 400,000 years old, and it's part of the foundation of this old volcano. If you think back to the very beginning of a volcano, there has to be a point where the very first volcanic eruptions occur, which originally would have been a little volcanic cone. And then that volcanic cone was totally buried by the later lava flows that erupted around it and built up the main mountain that today we call Mount Mazama. When that volcano collapsed, part of that old foundational rock was exposed. And that's what we see jutting up out of the water there on the south side of the lake. You'll find volcanic pinnacles many places in the park. And these are valleys that were totally buried by volcanic debris in that cataclysmic eruption of Mount Mazama. And within all of that debris, filling those valleys up 200-300 feet deep, there were a lot of volcanic gases trapped in that debris. And as the material settled, those gases escaped, worked their way out through cracks and crevices, and eventually formed vents up through the settling debris. And those gases were so hot that they literally welded the material around the vents into harder rock. The Old Man of the Lake was first described 100 years ago, and it's still floating around the lake, just as it was then. It's a mountain hemlock, and there are a lot of trees like that that live around the lake on the cliffs that surround it. And when those trees die, a lot of them fall down into the water and they float around. Occasionally, one end of the log would become more waterlogged than the other, and so it will tip upright and float around vertically in the water. That's not so unusual. What is unusual is to have one floating around for so long, because usually they'll float around for a few months or even a few years and then they'll sink to the bottom.
The lake is only 7,700 years old, so it has had a relatively short period of time for these kinds of systems to evolve. So what we have could be looked at as a primordial sea, maybe what the sea looked like millions and millions of years ago. Crater Lake is truly a national and international treasure because it is so clear and pristine. It can act as an early warning system for global change and atmospheric change, and it can give us a glimpse of what some of our other lakes and systems used to look like before we put our heavy footprint on the land. I think Jack Diamond and Bob Collier began their sediment studies on the lake in 1983 or 1984, where they put these large traps in the water that are essentially big funnels. And they're put at 3 different depths in the water column, and they collect material that rains down through the water column. And then there's a preservative in the bottom of the funnel, so that material won't deteriorate or be eaten up by bacteria or animals in the water column. We do see changes. We see annual changes that vary with the climate and the amount of input from rain and snow. The way that rain and snow falls greatly affects sedimentation rate. If we get a rain on snow event, we might get more landslides, and we'll see a lot more inorganic particles coming in off the caldera walls. Other years we have warmer summer conditions, a lot of nutrient inputs from the snow melt, and we'll see a higher biological component in the sediment traps. Crater Lake is personally and professionally inspiring. I see people come here from all disciplines and walks of life, and I love to experience their own personal inspiration and sense of awe when they see Crater Lake.
After exploring this area for a few days, I have found the perfect place to paint. This area is everything you could possibly want in a landscape painting. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start painting. Okay, I've taken the liberty of already doing a little pencil sketch, but what I want to do is I want to show you real quick those thirds that we break our canvas up into. So I want to be sure that I do place my horizon line above that 1/3 mark. This is Wizard Island. This is one of the key icons of Crater Lake. Just being very quick, and then diagonally put some of the brush strokes in. These mountains get a lot more cooler in this area of the painting, so I want to make sure that there's a lot more blue. Now, I'm also going to flick the brush just like this, just to give me little footnotes that these are little trees up here. Now, when I go back and do my sky, I'm not going to be too worried about them now, but when I do my sky, I'm going to bring those back down. I'm very quickly going to lay in the foreground rocks. Now, I want my darks to be transparent, especially in these rocks. These rocks have a wonderful richness to them. So by laying the darks in, I can actually leave these as the base of the rocks, and then later on just put a few highlights in and the rocks will be done. Now, as you can see, I'm just very quickly laying in the shadows. I love dark colors, and I've introduced a little bit more blue. And then I'm going to go back in and put more shadows in this rock in the foreground. And what I'm trying to do is create 3 dimensions in these rocks by having the shadow side here, the highlight here. And then it gets very dark as it gets down to the tree level. We're just going to flick the brush and just give the illusion of trees at this point. We're not going to be too worried about them. We just want to get the darks in first. And now we're going to start doing the water. One of the characteristics that's important at this point with the water is the reflection of the island. We're going to mix the same 2 colors together and start painting vertically. Now, when we paint water and reflection, always make sure your brush strokes go vertically. That's the best way to create reflection, and I'll show you why a little bit later. So mix these 2 colors together and start pulling down the shadow color. Very short, direct strokes, but pay attention to what you're looking at and pay attention to the reflection of the island. You want it to mimic exactly what you see by pulling the brush strokes down, just like that. Nice, deliberate strokes, and pay very close attention to what you're looking at. And as the island gets narrower, so does your reflection. It's wider here, and then narrower on the other side. This is the reflection. You want it a little bit more on the blue side because the water in this area is so spectacularly blue. That's what Crater Lake is known for, is the sapphire quality of the water. So with this dark color, we're just going to lay in the shadow of the mountain. This is just to remind me of where the light is at this very moment. Just very quickly fire that in. Now we're going to sketch this in a very vivid blue. Crater Lake has a lot of blue tone to it. It's time to actually start doing the sky. I'm going to introduce some white onto my palette. At this point, I'm going to introduce a couple new colors. I'm going to introduce some white, and I want to introduce some yellow. Now, this is an early morning sky, and the colors are almost on the green, and by introducing the yellow with my blue, I'm going to create a nice green, fresh color. That's what I'm going to use beyond these mountains. We're going to mix the white, a little bit of the yellow, and a little bit of the blue, right along the ridge, all the way from one end to the other. This color here is very similar to the value of the canvas color. So it's going to be kind of hard to see. But what we're going to do now is we're going to introduce more blue to this. And the blue will mix into this color, and you'll actually start getting the feeling of this morning sky. There's actually a greenish cast to the sky right along the mountain ridge here. That's what we want to get. We want to create that glow coming up over the mountains. And as we get higher to the top of the canvas, we want to get more blue, just blend it back and forth. We're just going to work that in. And these clouds just drift right over the mountain ridge. Just beautiful, soft. Let them just disappear right into the blue. Okay, now with the shadow down, what we're going to do is put a little bit of highlight. I'm going to introduce just a little bit more white, and I'm not even cleaning my brush. And just mix a little bit more white into this, maybe just a tad of yellow, just to get a little warm. It's not good to highlight with pure white. And then start painting in the highlights in our clouds. We're going to blend this highlight color right into the sky. Just work it back and forth and see just how beautifully it blends right into the blues. We're going to just take it all the way over to the edge. And notice at this point this wonderful glow that's starting to happen over my mountains. And I'm just going to take this color and drag it right into my water, just like that. And then let's bring some of that color in and bring that color all the way over to the edge of the canvas. Just drag that color down. Ah, there's nothing like being out here and painting. I just enjoy this so much at this point. The light's coming in. The mountains are getting these beautiful, beautiful shapes to them. So I'm laying in my darkest of my darks. And I'm going to work that right up to the water line. And I'm going to start finding that water line again. Just follow that line. These are the darkest shadows that I see in front of me. And they're supposed to blend right into the color that I originally laid on there. Now we're going to bring these lines diagonally down, get the energy of that mountain coming down to the water edge. Just get the energy. energy of the strokes. And this whole mountain's in a soft haze. Pay very close attention to the detail. Get the angles, the right angles. Make sure the detail is exactly where it needs to be. Now we're going to start focusing on the island. We're just laying in the shadow at this point. There's a little shadow over on the right-hand side. And remember, I was going to keep this all in shadow. The trees will be a mixture of my blue and my yellow together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my brush this way, and it's a flat brush. And I can just indicate my trees just by laying my brush flat on my canvas. I'm just finding the point, and I'm just putting each tree in. Now, if you do it right, you'll start picking up momentum, and it will go faster and faster. All these trees on this whole mountain are done that way. There's a few little trees on the very top. Okay, now we've got all the shadowed trees in. Now I want to create the highlights. Just place the highlights wherever you see them. Now remember, I also have a little bit of light that I want to peek out on the other side of this island. And I'm going to just lay this yellow in flat and then lift my brush up. A little different than the other trees. Create the illusion that they're a little smaller on the other side. This is the light coming around the mountain that we saw this morning. Now I'm trying to recall the highlights as they were this morning. Now with my rocks done, I'm going to take a fan brush and start blending the edges off. Just by taking my fan brush and just blending the edges down. We don't want any hard edges on there. Now don't do all these trees perfectly straight. You want a variety of shapes. I'm just using the corner of my brush. Just tapping. Now these trees are very skinny on the top of this rock. So I want to be sure I keep the branches very tight. Now remember, you want to keep a variety of shapes and forms. Don't repeat the brush strokes twice. We're also going to bring in a little highlight on our trunk of our tree here, just along the edge. We still need to do a few little branches. We'll do that just by taking the same brush and just wiggling it out. Hold the brush very lightly in your hands. And don't worry if you can't do them very neatly. These are old trees. Now with that done, we're ready to sign the painting. Expanded instructional DVDs that feature an hour-long demonstration of today's painting and other paintings in the series are available at the Grandview by calling 1-800-511-1337. Join us on our website, thegrandview.org, and get more information about our show. There you can download our free book, Everything You Need to Know About Outdoor Painting, along with a free diagram of today's subject. Stefan Baumann's The Grand View is funded in part by
paintingfromnature.com, a website for artists seeking inspiration, advice, and knowledge to master painting from nature. paintingfromnature.com.
and by
Masterpiece Canvas, makers of fine art canvases. We supply the canvas, you supply the vision.
and by
Plein Air magazine for people who love painting outdoors. pleinairmagazine.com